The Great Chamber of Valoran Prime was the largest structure Ambassador Daniel Carter had ever seen. Its walls stretched upward for nearly a mile, carved from living crystal that glowed with soft blue light. Thousands of alien delegates filled the observation galleries, representing species from every corner of the galaxy. And at the center of it all stood Daniel, a single human in a sea of beings who had traveled the stars for millions of years before Earth even existed. He had spent 20 years working toward this moment, 20 years of negotiations, cultural exchanges, and careful diplomacy. Humanity had proven itself worthy. They had shared their art, their music, their philosophy. They had shown the galaxy that humans were not the violent primitives the elder species had feared. Today was supposed to be the day humanity officially joined the Galactic Council. Daniel adjusted his formal uniform and looked up at the 12 High Chancellors who sat on their elevated thrones. Each one represented a species that had shaped galactic civilization. The Valorians, with their scaled skin and cold eyes. The Kethmar, with their 4 arms and gentle faces. The Silurians, who communicated through patterns of light that danced across their translucent bodies. High Chancellor Zorath of the Valorian Dominion raised one clawed hand, and the chamber fell silent. His voice echoed through the crystal halls, translated instantly into every language known to the Council. "We have gathered to discuss the matter of humanity," Zorath said, his yellow eyes fixed on Daniel with an expression that was impossible to read. "For 3 decades we have observed this young species. We have studied their history, their technology, and their nature." Daniel felt his heart beating faster. This was it, the moment humanity had been waiting for. "And we have reached a decision," Zorath continued. The other High Chancellors nodded in unison, and Daniel noticed something strange. None of them would meet his eyes. The Kethmar representative, who had always been friendly toward humans, stared at the floor. The Silurians' light patterns had gone dark and still. Something was wrong. "Humanity is hereby declared a threat to galactic stability," Zorath announced. "Their technological advancement is too rapid. Their military capabilities are too unpredictable. Their refusal to submit their defense forces to Council oversight is unacceptable." Daniel felt the words hit him like physical blows. "What? This is insane. We have done everything you asked. We have followed every protocol, every requirement." "Silence," Zorath commanded. "The Council has voted. The decision is unanimous." Daniel looked around the chamber, searching for any ally, any sympathetic face. He found none. The thousands of delegates watched him with expressions ranging from fear to disgust to cold indifference. "Effective immediately," Zorath continued, "humanity is to be isolated. All trade routes to Earth and its colonies will be severed. All communication relays will be dismantled. A network of interdiction buoys will be established around human space. Any vessel attempting to cross this boundary will be destroyed." "You cannot do this," Daniel shouted. His voice cracked with desperation. "We have rights. We have treaties. You promised us membership." "We promised nothing," Zorath said. "We offered observation. We offered consideration. And we have considered. Humanity is too dangerous to be allowed into the galactic community. This quarantine will remain in effect indefinitely." Council guards moved toward Daniel. They were Valorian soldiers in black armor, each one standing 8 feet tall with muscles like coiled steel. Daniel knew he had no chance of fighting them, but he stood his ground anyway. "You are making a terrible mistake," he said, his voice carrying across the silent chamber. "Humanity has done nothing to deserve this. We came to you in peace. We offered friendship." "And you answer with imprisonment." Zorath leaned forward on his throne. "We answer with caution. Your species rose from primitive animals to space travel in less than 10,000 years. That is unprecedented. That is unnatural. And that is terrifying." The guards grabbed Daniel's arms and began dragging him toward the exit. He struggled against their grip, but it was useless. As they pulled him through the massive doors, he shouted his final words to the council. "You will regret this silence. One day you will need us, and you will remember what you did here today." The doors slammed shut behind him, and humanity's dream of joining the stars died in that moment. 6 hours later, Admiral Loren Mitchell stood on the bridge of the USS Sentinel and watched the interdiction buoys activate. They were massive structures, each one the size of a small city, and they formed a perfect sphere around human space. Their weapon systems came online with a low hum that she could feel in her bones. "Admiral," her first officer said quietly, "Command is ordering all ships to retreat behind the quarantine line." Loren gripped the railing in front of her until her knuckles turned white. She had served in the Navy for 30 years. She had fought pirates, rescued colonists, and explored regions of space no human had ever seen. And now she was being told to run home and hide. "Admiral?" the first officer repeated. Loren watched as Council warships took up positions along the boundary. There were hundreds of them, each one carrying enough firepower to destroy a planet. The message was clear. Stay in your cage or die. "All ships," Loren said, her voice steady despite the rage burning in her chest. "Fall back to Earth. Maintain formation. Do not engage the enemy." "Enemy, Admiral?" Loren turned to look at her first officer. He was young, barely 30 years old. He had grown up believing the galaxy was full of potential friends. Today, he learned the truth. "Yes," Loren said. "Enemy. Remember this day, Lieutenant. Remember what they did to us, because I promise you, humanity will never forget." The fleet turned and began its long journey home. Behind them, the interdiction buoys sealed humanity away from the rest of the universe. On Earth, people watched the news in stunned silence. Families gathered around screens, unable to comprehend what had happened. Children asked their parents why the aliens did not want to be friends anymore. Parents had no answers to give. President Marcus Webb addressed the world that night. He stood behind a simple podium, his face tired and sad. "Today, the Galactic Council showed us who they really are," he said. "They fear us. They fear our potential. And rather than embrace us as partners, they have chosen to lock us away like prisoners. But I want every human being to hear me clearly. This is not the end. This is the beginning. We will survive this betrayal. We will grow stronger, and one day, the galaxy will understand that humanity cannot be silenced." The broadcast ended, and Earth fell quiet. The stars that had once seemed so full of promise now looked cold and distant. Humanity was alone, but they would not stay that way forever. The Council expected humanity to wither. They expected the young species to collapse without access to galactic trade, without the resources and technology that came from being part of the larger civilization. They expected despair, stagnation, and eventual decline. They were completely wrong. Director Nathan Cole stood in the center of the United Earth Science Division's main laboratory, surrounded by holographic displays showing data streams from every research facility on the planet. He was 53 years old, with gray hair and tired eyes that had seen too many failures. But today, those eyes were bright with excitement. "Run the simulation again," he said. His lead researcher, a young woman named Patricia Santos, tapped a series of commands into her console. The holographic display shifted, showing a small reactor core surrounded by swirling energy patterns. "Fusion efficiency at 98%, Patricia reported. "Power output exceeds anything the Council ever developed. Director, this actually works." Nathan allowed himself a small smile. For 15 years, his teams had been working on this project. The Council had always kept the best technology for themselves, feeding humanity scraps while hoarding the real advances. Now, without access to those scraps, humans had been forced to innovate from scratch. and they had succeeded beyond anyone's imagination. "Begin mass production immediately," Nathan ordered. "I want every colony equipped with these reactors within 5 years. No more rationing. No more energy shortages. Humanity is going to light up the darkness they put us in." Across the quarantine zone, similar breakthroughs were happening every day. Cut off from galactic supply chains, human scientists had to solve problems that the elder species had solved millions of years ago. But humans approached these problems differently. They thought in ways the Council had never considered. They made connections that seemed impossible. General Christina Vance understood this better than anyone. She sat in her office at United Terran Navy headquarters, reviewing reports from every military installation in human space. The old defense forces had been a mess when the quarantine began. Scattered colonial militias with outdated equipment and no coordination. Politicians had never seen the need for a real military. After all, humanity was going to be friends with the galaxy. That fantasy was dead now. Christina had spent 20 years rebuilding everything from the ground up. She had unified the colonial forces into a single command structure. She had established training academies that produced soldiers and officers of exceptional quality. And she had overseen the construction of a fleet that would make the Council very uncomfortable if they ever saw it. Her aide knocked on the door and entered with a tablet. "General, the new destroyer class is ready for final review." Christina took the tablet and studied the specifications. The ship was sleek and aggressive, designed for speed and firepower rather than the elegant curves the Council preferred. Its weapons systems were based on technology that humans had developed in secret, hidden from the monitoring drones that the Council had left behind to watch them. "Beautiful," Christina said quietly. "How many can we build per year?" "Current projections say 200, General. If we expand the shipyards on Mars and Titan, we could push that to 300. Christina nodded. "Do it, and make sure the crews are ready. I want every ship fully staffed and trained." "May I ask why the urgency, General? The Council shows no signs of lifting the quarantine." Christina set down the tablet and looked at her aide with an expression that was calm but serious. "The galaxy is a dangerous place, Lieutenant. The Council knows this, even if they pretend otherwise. Something will happen eventually, something they cannot handle alone, and when that day comes, humanity will be ready." The aide saluted and left. Christina turned to look out her window at the stars beyond. Somewhere out there, the Council was continuing their lives, secure in their belief that humanity was no longer a concern. They had no idea what was being built in the silence they had created. Dr. Kevin Park made the breakthrough that changed everything in the 32nd year of the quarantine. He was working alone in his laboratory on the colony world of New Boston, running experiments that most scientists considered a waste of time. The concept of zero-point energy had been theoretical for centuries. The Council had declared it impossible long ago. Kevin did not care what the Council declared. He had been obsessed with this idea since childhood. The quantum vacuum was not truly empty. It contained unimaginable amounts of energy, fluctuating in and out of existence at scales too small to measure. If that energy could be tapped, humanity would have access to unlimited power. On a quiet Tuesday evening, Kevin finally succeeded. The device was small, no larger than a coffee cup. It sat on his workbench, humming softly, producing more energy than a fusion reactor the size of a building. Kevin stared at it for a long time, his hands shaking. He understood immediately what this meant. This was not just a power source. This was a weapon. This was a shield. This was the key to technologies that the Council had never dreamed of. Kevin contacted Director Nathan Cole that night using a secure channel. He explained what he had created, and there was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Tell no one," Nathan finally said. "Bring the device to Earth personally. We need to keep this secret until we are ready to use it." "Ready for what, Director?" "I do not know yet. But I know this changes everything." The monitoring drones the Council had left behind continued their silent observation. They recorded population statistics, energy consumption, and communication patterns. They reported that humanity was surviving but showed no signs of unusual development. The drones never detected the underground research facilities. They never noticed the hidden shipyards. They never realized that every piece of data they collected was carefully manipulated to show exactly what the Council expected to see. 50 years passed in silence. Children who had watched the quarantine begin grew into adults. Those adults had children of their own. An entire generation was born knowing nothing but isolation. They grew up hearing stories about the day the galaxy rejected them. They learned about Ambassador Daniel Carter's final words in the council chamber. They remembered. Admiral Scott Harrison was 12 years old when the interdiction buoys activated. He remembered standing with his father on a hill overlooking the spaceport, watching the last ships return home. His father had been a cargo pilot who traded with alien worlds. That career ended overnight. Scott remembered his father crying. It was the only time he ever saw the man weep. Now Scott was 62 years old and commander of the United Terran Navy's First Fleet. His flagship, the USS Horizon, was the most advanced warship ever built by human hands. It carried weapons that could crack planetary shields and engines that could cross the galaxy in weeks. He stood on the bridge and looked at the tactical display showing the interdiction buoys. They had been there his entire adult life, silent, watching, waiting. "One day," Scott said quietly to himself, "one day we will show them what their silence created." He did not know how soon that day would come. The first warning came from a Valorian observation post on the edge of known space. The sensors detected something massive moving through the void between galaxies, something that should not exist. Lieutenant Commander Vexnar studied the readings with growing confusion. The object was not a ship. It was not a natural phenomenon. It was a living structure, larger than any space station ever built, and it was heading directly toward the Milky Way at speeds that defied physics. He transmitted his findings to the Valorian High Command and waited for a response. The response never came. 3 hours later, his observation post went silent. High Chancellor Zorath received the report the following morning. He was old now, his scales faded to a dull gray, his movements slow and careful. He had ruled the Galactic Council for 70 years, and in that time he had faced many challenges. Pirates, border disputes, economic crises. He had handled them all with cold efficiency. This was different. "Show me the images," he commanded. His military advisor activated the holographic display. The chamber filled with darkness, and then the images appeared. Zorath felt something he had not felt in decades: fear. The creatures were nightmares made flesh. They had no consistent form. Some were massive serpents covered in metallic scales. Others were clouds of smaller organisms that moved as one. Still others were walking mountains of twisted organic matter and machinery fused together in impossible ways. They were the Zathari swarm. "We have no records of this species," the advisor said, his voice shaking. "Our historians have searched every database. There is nothing. They came from outside our galaxy." "How many?" Zorath asked. The advisor hesitated. "We estimate several trillion individual organisms, High Chancellor. They consumed the observation post in minutes. They are now moving toward our outer colonies." Zorath closed his eyes. He had spent his entire reign preparing for threats he understood. Rival species, rebellions, political instability. He had never imagined something like this. "Mobilize the fleet," he ordered. "All of it." The Galactic Council possessed the most powerful military force in known history. Thousands of warships carrying weapons that could shatter moons, soldiers trained for millennia in the art of war, technology refined over millions of years. It was not enough. The Battle of Valorian Reach lasted 6 hours. The Council sent 800 warships against the swarm's advance force. They used their most devastating weapons. They employed strategies that had never failed before. When the battle ended, only 12 Council ships remained. The rest had been consumed. Their crews had been absorbed into the swarm, their technology taken and adapted. The swarm grew stronger with every victory. Ambassador Megan Torres of the Council's Emergency Committee watched the disaster unfold from her office on the capital world. She was human, one of the few who had been assigned to work with the Council before the quarantine began. They had kept her as a curiosity, a reminder of the species they had locked away. Now she was the only person in the room with any hope to offer. "You have to lift the quarantine," she said to the gathered representatives. "Humanity can help. You need us." The Kethmar delegate shook his head. "The humans are dangerous. They cannot be trusted." "More dangerous than that?" Megan pointed at the display showing swarm forces tearing through another colony. "The swarm will not stop. They will not negotiate. They will consume everything in this galaxy, including Earth eventually. But right now, you are the ones dying. Let us help." "The Council will never agree," the Silurian said, her light patterns dim with despair. "High Chancellor Zorath would rather see the galaxy burn than admit he was wrong about humanity." Megan slammed her hand on the table. "Then he will get his wish, because nothing else is going to stop them." The months that followed were a nightmare. The Kethmar Republic fell in 60 days. 17 billion people died as their worlds were stripped bare. The survivors fled in refugee ships that had nowhere to go. The Silurian Federation lasted only weeks. Their beautiful crystal cities were reduced to rubble. Their ancient libraries, containing knowledge accumulated over millions of years, were lost forever. Ambassador Megan watched the final transmission from Silos 4. A young Silurian child, her light patterns flickering with terror, crying for someone to save her. The transmission cut off. The planet was gone. High Chancellor Zorath called an emergency session of the Council. The great chamber that had once been filled with delegates now held only a few hundred survivors. The observation galleries were empty. The crystal walls seemed darker somehow, as if the building itself was dying. "We have no options left," Zorath said. His voice was weak, nothing like the commanding tone he had used to condemn humanity 50 years ago. "Our fleets are destroyed. Our worlds are falling. The swarm will reach the core systems within 6 months." "There is one option," a voice called out. Everyone turned. Ambassador Megan Torres stood at the back of the chamber, her arms crossed, her expression hard. "You still have the quarantine, boys," she said. "You still have the humans locked away. And they have had 50 years to prepare for something exactly like this." Zorath stared at her for a long moment. His pride screamed at him to refuse. His arrogance demanded that he find another way. But there was no other way. The swarm had proven that the Council was not as powerful as they believed. "What makes you think they will help us?" Zorath asked. "After what we did to them?" Megan smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Because they are human, and humans do not let the innocent suffer, even when those innocents hurt them first. You never understood that. It is why you feared them. It is why you were wrong." Zorath lowered his head. For the first time in his long life, he felt the weight of his mistakes crushing him. "Send the message," he ordered. "Tell the humans we need help. Tell them we are sorry. Tell them we will give them anything they want." His advisor hesitated. "What should the message say, High Chancellor?" Zorath thought for a moment. There were no words adequate for what he had to do. No diplomatic phrases that could undo 50 years of cruelty. In the end, he chose simplicity. "One word," he said. "Help." The message was transmitted through the interdiction buoy network, reversing its purpose for the first time since it was built. It traveled at faster than light speed, crossing the vast distance to Earth in seconds. And in the command center of the United Terran Navy, Admiral Scott Harrison watched the word appear on his screen. He read it 3 times to make sure he understood. Then he smiled. "Get me the president," he said. "It is time to remind the galaxy who we are." President Hannah Cole stood in the broadcast chamber, surrounded by cameras that would carry her image to every human being alive. She was 61 years old, with silver hair and calm brown eyes that had seen both the best and worst of humanity. Her father had been Director Nathan Cole, the man who led the scientific renaissance during the silent years. She had grown up watching him work to save their species. Now it was her turn. "My fellow humans," she began. "1 hour ago, we received a message from the Galactic Council. After 50 years of silence, after 50 years of imprisonment, they have finally spoken to us. They said one word: help." She paused, letting the weight of that word settle over her audience. Across human space, people stopped what they were doing. Workers put down their tools. Children looked up from their lessons. Soldiers stood at attention before screens in barracks and on ships. "The Council is dying," Hannah continued. "A threat from beyond our galaxy, something called the Zethari Swarm, is destroying everything in its path. The Council's fleets have been shattered, their worlds are burning, and in their darkest hour they remembered us." Her voice grew harder. "They remembered the species they locked away, the species they called dangerous, the species they feared because we grew too fast, learned too much, dreamed too big. Now they need us. The question is simple: what do we do?" Silence filled the broadcast chamber. Hannah knew that billions of people were watching, waiting for her answer. "Some would say we should let them burn," she admitted. "They betrayed us. They treated us like animals. They stole 50 years of our history. No one would blame us for closing our eyes and letting the swarm finish what they started." She stepped closer to the camera. "But that is not who we are. Humanity has always been defined by our compassion. We help those in need, even when they have hurt us. We save lives, even the lives of our enemies. This is not weakness. This is our greatest strength." Hannah straightened her shoulders. "I am ordering the United Terran Navy to cross the quarantine line and engage the swarm. We will save the Council. We will protect the innocent, and we will show the galaxy that humanity is not the monster they feared. We are so much more." Admiral Scott Harrison received the order on the bridge of the USS Horizon. He had been waiting for this moment for 50 years. All around him, his crew worked with quiet efficiency, preparing the ship for combat. "All fleets report ready, Admiral," his first officer announced. Scott looked at the tactical display. 12,000 warships were assembled across human space, each one crewed by men and women who had grown up hearing stories about the Council's betrayal. They were angry, they were determined, and they were ready. "Open a channel to all ships," Scott ordered. The communication systems activated, connecting him to every vessel in the fleet. "This is Admiral Harrison. For 50 years we have trained for this day. We have built these ships. We have perfected these weapons. We have prepared for war. But this is not the war we expected. We are not going to fight the Council. We are going to save them." He paused, thinking of his father crying on that hill so long ago. "I know many of you have reasons to hate them. I know what they took from us. But today, we are going to show the galaxy something they have never seen. We are going to show them mercy. We are going to show them that humanity does not become the enemy just because we were treated like one." His voice hardened. "That said, we are also going to show them what happens when you underestimate human beings. The swarm thinks they can consume everything. They have not met us yet. Let us introduce ourselves." The fleet activated its jump drives. Space twisted around 12,000 ships as they folded reality itself. crossing distances that would take conventional vessels years in mere seconds. This was the technology humanity had developed in secret, hidden from the Council's watching drones. They emerged in Council space like an avalanche of steel and fire. Captain Derek Lynn commanded the first wave, his destroyer group jumping directly into combat above the burning world of Silos IV. Swarm forces filled the space around the planet, millions of biomechanical creatures feeding on the remains of civilization. "All weapons free," Derek ordered. Human ships opened fire. The weapons they carried were based on Dr. Kevin Park's zero-point technology, channeling impossible amounts of energy into concentrated beams of destruction. Swarm bioships that had shrugged off Council weapons dissolved under the assault. Creatures that had terrorized the galaxy for months died by the thousands. The swarm tried to adapt, but humans had spent 50 years planning for every possible threat. For each strategy the swarm attempted, human commanders had a counter ready. Electronic warfare systems disrupted their hive mind coordination. Precision strikes targeted their command organisms. Marine assault teams boarded larger creatures and destroyed them from within. Within 6 hours, Silos 4 was secure. Admiral Harrison led the main fleet to Valoran Prime itself, the capital of the Galactic Council. They arrived to find the situation even worse than expected. Swarm forces had breached the planetary shields and were landing on the surface. The great crystal chamber where humanity had been condemned was under siege. "All ships, focus fire on the orbital forces," Scott commanded. "Marine divisions, prepare for ground assault." The battle raged for 14 hours. Human warships fought in space while transports dropped soldiers into the streets of the Valorian capital. General Christina Vance, now 73 years old, commanded the ground forces personally. She had spent her entire career preparing for this moment. She led her troops through ruined streets, fighting swarm creatures at every intersection. The aliens were horrifying up close, twisted combinations of flesh and metal that seemed to feel no pain. But human soldiers did not retreat. They held their lines, they protected each other, and they pushed forward. By dawn, the swarm forces on Valoran Prime were destroyed. Admiral Harrison walked through the ruins of the Council chamber. Valorian soldiers stared at him in shock. They had expected to die. Instead, they had been saved by the species their leaders had imprisoned. High Chancellor Zorath emerged from a collapsed doorway. He was covered in dust and blood, his ancient body barely able to stand. He looked at the human admiral with eyes full of confusion and something that might have been shame. "Why?" Zorath asked. "After everything we did to you, after everything we took, why did you come?" Scott stopped in front of the alien who had condemned his species to 50 years of silence. He could have said many things. He could have been cruel. He could have demanded apologies and reparations. Instead, he simply said, "You asked for help. We are here." Zorath lowered his head. For the first time in his long life, he had no response. Around them, human soldiers began setting up medical stations and distributing supplies. They treated wounded Valorians with the same care they showed their own people. They shared food and water without asking for anything in return. The galaxy watched in amazement. The species they had feared, the species they had locked away, was saving them, not with anger or vengeance, but with compassion. Humanity had returned. The war against the Zethari swarm lasted 3 years. It was the bloodiest conflict in galactic history, fought across thousands of star systems, claiming billions of lives. But from the moment humanity entered the fight, the outcome was never truly in doubt. Human fleets pushed the swarm back system by system. They developed new weapons, new strategies, and new technologies faster than the swarm could adapt. Where Council forces had been overwhelmed, human forces held firm. Where ancient civilizations had crumbled, human soldiers built new defenses. Dr. Kevin Park worked without rest throughout the war. His zero-point technology was adapted into weapons that could destroy swarm hive ships with single strikes. His research teams created shields that could withstand anything the swarm threw at them. His inventions saved countless lives across the galaxy. But the swarm was not easily defeated. They learned, they grew, and they retreated to their central nexus, a structure hidden deep in the galactic core. General Christina Vance studied the intelligence reports with grim determination. The nexus was enormous, larger than most moons, and it served as the brain of the entire swarm. Every creature, every ship, every strategy originated from this single point. If they destroyed it, the war would end. If they failed, the swarm would rebuild and return stronger than ever. "I will lead the assault personally," Christina announced to her command staff. Admiral Harrison shook his head. "General, you are 76 years old. This mission is practically suicide. We need you here, coordinating the overall campaign." Christina smiled, and there was no fear in her expression. "I have spent my entire life preparing our military for a moment like this. I built the fleet that saved the Council. I trained the soldiers who turned the tide. If anyone is going to end this war, it should be me." "General." "That is an order, Admiral. Prepare my assault force. We leave in 12 hours. The Battle of the Nexus was the largest military operation humanity had ever attempted. 3,000 warships jumped into the galactic core, emerging in a region of space so dense with radiation that sensors could barely function. The swarm was waiting for them. Christina commanded from the bridge of her flagship, directing formations and coordinating attacks with the calm precision that had defined her career. Around her, human ships fought and died, holding the line against waves of swarm creatures that seemed endless. "We need to reach the core," Christina ordered. "All ships, form assault wedge. We are punching through." The fleet surged forward. Human weapons carved a path through the swarm defenses, each ship knowing that they might not survive the next minute. Marines launched boarding actions against the Nexus itself, fighting their way through organic corridors filled with horrors that would haunt their dreams forever. Christina's flagship took the lead, absorbing fire that would have destroyed lesser vessels. Her shields flickered and failed. Her hull breached in a dozen places, but she refused to stop. "Fire the main weapon," she commanded as her ship reached the heart of the Nexus. "Full power." The zero-point cannon discharged, releasing energy equivalent to a small star directly into the swarm's brain. The Nexus shuddered. The billions of creatures connected to it screamed in unison, and then, slowly, the entire structure began to collapse. Christina watched the destruction from her damaged bridge. She knew her ship would not survive. She knew she would not make it home, but she also knew that her people would live because of what she had done. "Tell them I was proud," she said to her communications officer. "Tell them the war is over." Her ship disappeared in the explosion that followed. Christina Vance died as she had lived, fighting for humanity. Across the galaxy, swarm creatures stopped moving. Without the Nexus to guide them, they became mindless, wandering things that could be destroyed easily. Within months, the last of them were eliminated. The war was over. The Galactic Council convened for the first time since the conflict began. The Great Chamber on Valoran Prime had been rebuilt with human help, its crystal walls shining brighter than ever. But the atmosphere was different now. The arrogance that had once filled this space was gone, replaced by something that looked very much like humility. The 12 thrones of the High Chancellors were occupied by new faces. Most of the original leaders had died during the swarm invasion. Only High Chancellor Zorath remained, his ancient body kept alive by medical technology that humans had provided. The observation galleries were filled with representatives from every surviving species, and at the center of the chamber stood a delegation of humans led by Ambassador Claire Bennett. Claire was 32 years old. Her grandmother had been the sister of Daniel Carter, the ambassador who had been dragged from this chamber 50 years ago. She had grown up hearing stories about that day. Now she stood in the same spot where her great-uncle had been condemned, facing the beings who had imprisoned her people. High Chancellor Zorath rose from his throne. His movements were slow and painful, but his voice carried across the chamber with surprising strength. "We have gathered to acknowledge a truth that should have been obvious long ago," Zorath began. "The Galactic Council made a terrible mistake. We feared humanity because they were different. We punished them because they were strong. And when darkness came, they answered our cruelty with kindness." He paused, gathering himself for what came next. "On behalf of the Galactic Council and all the species we represent, I offer humanity our deepest apology. We were wrong. We were afraid. And we were unjust. General Christina Vance gave her life to save civilizations that had locked her people away. Millions of human soldiers fought and died for species that had called them dangerous." Zorath lowered his head. "We do not deserve their forgiveness, but we ask for it anyway." The chamber fell silent. Every eye turned to Ambassador Claire Bennett. She stood motionless for a long moment, letting the weight of history settle around her. 50 years of isolation. 50 years of pain. 50 years of being told that humanity was not good enough to stand among the stars, and then 3 years of war where humans had proven exactly what they were capable of. "My great-uncle stood in this chamber decades ago," Claire finally said. "He came here believing that humanity would find friends among the stars. Instead, he found fear and rejection. You locked us away because you did not understand us. You thought silence would break us." Her voice grew stronger. "You were wrong. Our isolation did not destroy us. It made us stronger. It united us. It forced us to become the best version of ourselves. And when you finally called for help, we answered. Not because we had forgotten what you did. We remember everything. Every day of those 50 years is burned into our collective memory." She stepped forward, her eyes meeting Zorath's directly. "We answered because that is who we are. Humanity does not abandon those in need, even those who have hurt us. We do not become monsters just because we were treated like ones. This is not weakness. This is our choice." Claire paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was softer, but no less powerful. "The Galactic Council asks for forgiveness. Very well. Humanity forgives you. But understand this clearly. We will never forget. We will never allow ourselves to be silenced again. And we will never let you forget what your fear almost cost the galaxy." She looked around the chamber at the thousands of alien faces watching her. "From this day forward, humanity takes its place not as a junior member of your council, but as an equal. We have earned that right with our blood, our sacrifice, and our mercy. If you cannot accept that, we will leave and build our own future among the stars. But I think you have learned enough to make the right choice this time." High Chancellor Zorath bowed his head. "We accept. Humanity is welcome as a full and equal partner in the Galactic Council. Your voice will carry the same weight as any other. Your interests will be protected by the same laws. This is our promise, and we will keep it." The chamber erupted in applause. Species that had once feared humanity now celebrated them. Survivors of worlds that human soldiers had saved wept with gratitude. The crystal walls seemed to glow brighter, as if the building itself was welcoming humanity home. Ambassador Claire Bennett stood in the heart of it all, thinking of her great-uncle and all the generations who had lived and died in silence. They had never stopped believing that this day would come. She smiled. Humanity had finally taken its rightful place among the stars, not through conquest or destruction, but through compassion and sacrifice. They had proven that their greatest strength was not their technology or their military. It was their refusal to become the monsters that others expected them to be. and the universe would never forget the lesson they had taught. The silent years were over. Humanity's voice would echo through the galaxy for all time.